My name's Salam. I'm the host of the Outwith podcast, and I'm also a subscriber to the Ferret, which is an award-winning investigative news site. And we're very proud of our new partnership with the Ferret. They're delighted to have us too, so much so that if you go to theferret.scot and subscribe using the code Outwith19, you'll get a third of an annual subscription, and you'll get 3 months if you choose a monthly subscription. So that's 3 months free or a third of an annual subscription, all by using the code Outwith19. It's a good deal. You should check them out. The Ferret are great. We're very proud to be partnered with them. Enjoy the podcast. Well, hello and welcome to Outwith, the podcast that takes you beyond the headlines and beyond our borders. I'm Hala Mohyeddin. Now, anyone who follows international news will be aware of the case of Jamal Khashoggi. He's the Saudi journalist who was murdered inside the Saudi embassy in Turkey. Now, the backlash after the murder in October 2018 has been fierce, and we're recording this in February 2019, and the controversy is still ongoing. One consequence of this perhaps unwelcome global scrutiny is that it's shone a sharp spotlight on Saudi Arabia, its ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and the decisions that MBS, as he's also known, has taken since coming to power. Now, one of those decisions which has received much less in the way of coverage is the ongoing war in Yemen. The civil war in the Arab world's poorest country has been going on for well over 4 years now, and it's having devastating consequences. Close to 20 million people there are at risk of famine, and there appears to be no end in sight. So what is Saudi Arabia's involvement? How is this war linked to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi? And are we all in the West, and in Scotland in particular, are we complicit in the humanitarian disaster which is ongoing in Yemen? Well, to find out, I'm joined by Billy Briggs, an investigative freelance journalist who also works with the Ferrets. Now, Billy, you have been covering this story for quite some time. Thank you so much for coming into the kitchen and appearing on the podcast. How did you start getting involved in the story around Yemen? How did you get into it?
I'd reported for the Sunday Mail newspaper around 2014 about an attack in Gaza which involved paveway fore missiles. Now, they're smart bombs that are made in Fife by Raytheon, a US arms firm. When the Yemen conflict escalated in March 2014, when the Saudis started bombing Yemen, we started to look at we investigate to see whether paveway fore missiles were being used. So much of my reporting since then has focused on Raytheon, the US arms firm that has their factory in Glenrothes, the use of paveway fore missiles in the conflict. And I've reported for the Sunday Mail, the Sunday Post, and the Ferrets produce a lot of reports surrounding that issue.
Well. They certainly have. So tell us what these missiles are. I'm not very, I'm not au fait with the term. What do these missiles do? What's a smart missile?
Paveway fore bombs are massive bombs that are guided by laser-guided systems. And Raytheon is the fourth largest arms company in the world. It's got a factory in Glenrothes, Fife, where over 700 people are employed.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge contributor to the local economy. It's their premier plant in the UK. Right. They've moved all their production to Glenrothes. So yeah, it's a massive project, and it's Raytheon rarely comments at all. But I mean, they have pointed out that the money they generate for the economy is huge. Yeah. They've also received funding from the Scottish Government through Scottish Enterprise, just over £200,000, which has caused some controversy.
Yeah. one might think.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing these missiles aren't cheap and they won't be short of a bob or two. What are they doing getting money from Scottish Enterprise for?
That's a bone of contention. Scottish Enterprise have been criticised for funding the arms industry. They've disputed the fact that they're actually funding the arms industry. They say that their money's for diversification. But groups like Campaign Against the Arms Trade and the Scottish Greens have been calling them out for that, and they've been disputing that. So it's still a bit vague. It's exactly what the money's been used for, and Raytheon hasn't commented so far.
Right. I'm just a bit surprised to hear that missiles like this are being manufactured in Scotland. It's not something that I guess you wouldn't sort of put an advert in the paper saying, great news, this is what we're doing. But
what they actually produce at Raytheon is the laser guided systems.
Oh, just the laser guided systems
for the missiles. Yeah.
But so it's parts.
They're
of
actually
this.
bombs.
Right. Okay. But still, so we're industry here is feeding into this this chain that's putting the bombs together. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Saudis, the Saudi-led coalition, which has been conducting airstrikes in Yemen for 4 years now, they've been accused of multiple war crimes by targeting schools, hospitals, civilian structures. There's been scores of alleged war crimes. Some of them have been linked back to the Paveway 4 missiles. So there's been pressure on the UK government to stop their arms sales to the Saudis because of these allegations of war crimes.
Right. Let's look at the war itself. For most people will be aware that there is a war in Yemen, although you'd be forgiven for thinking otherwise. It doesn't really, top the headlines in the nightly news bulletins. Give us just some background about this conflict. Yemen, difficult to pinpoint on a map. How did it start? Why did it start? Do you have any info on that?
It can be traced back to the Arab Spring of 2011. The long-serving President Salam had been in power for quite a long time. He was viewed as being authoritarian. He handed over power to his deputy, Mansour Hadi, who had to deal with quite a lot of problems. There was militant attacks from the Houthis, who were opposed to Saudi Arabia's influence in the northern part of Yemen. So the conflict kind of has its roots there. In 2014, the Houthis took over Sana'a. President Hadi went into exile, went to Saudi Arabia, and that's when the Saudis and a coalition of Arab nations decided to start bombing Yemen. So it kind of escalated at that point. The Saudi-led coalition's backed by America, UK, and France. The Houthis are backed by Iran.
So it's almost like a proxy war kind of situation, isn't it?
You've got this Sunni Shiite dynamic as well,
right.
Which is at the heart of it. But yeah, it's like a proxy war. And
in the middle of it, you've got this country, which is, well, even before all this kicked off, it was one of the poorest countries in the world, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. So the problems it's facing a catastrophe. The humanitarian situation is absolutely dire. I think the UN is meeting in Geneva today to try and raise some urgent more funds for aid to help the population.
So in terms of so this war has been going on for, well, let's just say years now. Absolutely years. And, it's not frequently in the news. It does tend to pop up occasionally when you see, one of the more recent articles was, and all this sort of happened in the aftermath of the Khashoggi murder, when people were starting to say, wait a minute, so Saudi Arabia is doing this. This is what they're also involved in. And then you start seeing there's harrowing pictures that come out of Yemen. So there's a lot of, malnourished children. The New York Times was publishing just devastating, photojournalism reports and so on. And the effect that's having on the people there really is, I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, the New York Times have done some excellent reporting. CNN have been in, the BBC produced some good reports. Yeah, completely harrowing images have been coming out of starving children. There's been a cholera outbreak as well. The health system's virtually collapsed.
Yeah.
Schools have been destroyed. It's the UN has been saying now for 2-3 years. It's absolutely desperate.
Yeah.
One of the problems has been getting in. The big media beasts have managed to get in on occasion to get reports out, but there's a lack of independent reporting generally from within Yemen, so it's difficult to understand what's happening on the ground. There's a lot of various actors involved as well. Al-Qaeda's been, and other jihadi groups have been fighting the Houthis, so there's that dynamic as well.
Bit of a free-for-all, no?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's a complete quagmire. It's a complete mess, and it's a bit vague about what exactly Britain and America's role is. They say that they provide weapons and technical support, but there's not been much transparency about what else they may be involved in.
Right. So you mentioned that larger organisations have managed to get in there. It has to be said. It's a case of getting in and getting out. You tried as well, didn't you? You tried to get into Yemen.
We did a couple of years ago. We contacted people inside Sana'a, the capital, fixers. They were recommended by Human Rights Watch. We had a conversation with them about going in. The costs were extortionate. We were quoted about $500 a day. I work with a photographer, and as a freelance team, we fund our own trips, then try and recover costs. We worked out it was going to cost probably around 10 grand to go in for 2 weeks, which was beyond our resources. We also then looked at getting a grant from an American organisation, but we needed a commission in advance, and the media outlets in the UK didn't want to give a commission in advance because if anything happened, they would then have a duty of care to you. So it's not been possible to go in, which is not ideal. So I've had to focus my reporting from the Scottish angle of Raytheon and its pay-for missiles.
Let's come to the weapons in a second. It's interesting. You were talking about sort of the difficulty of getting access. I've been sort of following this story for a long time, and I interviewed a representative from a charity, and they had managed, she talks about how difficult it was just to get into Yemen. So even in terms of NGOs, charities, aid workers, they found it exceptionally difficult to get in because the Saudi-led coalition is, they sort of block access. It's not difficult to get into, and then when you from the other side, from the Houthis and their supporters, they too are blocking access. And I put it to her, these kids are starving. These people are on the brink of famine. I don't understand why we've not called it a famine yet. It has been going on for so long. And she said to me that the difficulty was just, they have aid, we just can't get it in. You just can't get it in. The ports are controlled, and it's using food almost as a weapon of war, blocking the access of any kind of aid into the country. So there are, some people who are doing quite well out of it, skimming a bit off the top and saying, we'll only let you take these trucks in if you give, half of it to me and the soldiers and whatnot. So when you look at it like that, almost 10 grand for 2 weeks could almost seem like a bargain. Just the difficulty of getting in and the difficulty of actually reaching the people who are suffering the most is just what's perhaps most striking about this.
Yeah, commercial flights were stopped for months at a time into Sana'a. UN flights were going in. We were told that some journalists were going in on UN flights, but then that stopped because the Saudis were putting pressure on the UN. Weren't able to independently verify that. So from a reporting point of view, there's not been a huge amount of reporting made. This has been going on for 4 years now. It's a massive conflict, and you look at the scale of the reporting from Iraq, for example, and Afghanistan, Syria, and it's been overshadowed by the Syrian conflict as well.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah, to a large extent. And I think the news agenda here is focused on Brexit. We've had Donald Trump in America every other day coming out with something entertaining.
Yes.
So Yemen, yeah, in terms of issues, is weighed down, I think, the news agenda for much of the world, I think. And it is an obscure country, and it's a complex conflict as well, which I think makes it more difficult to report. Particularly, I go back to the point of, often when you go into conflict zones, what you find happens on the ground is a lot different from the propaganda that's put out by both sides. And I think it's been difficult to cut through that kind of fog of war with Yemen so far. As I said, there's been some excellent reporting from reporters with the New York Times and CNN, but it's been kind of limited, I think.
So let's cut through the fog of war. So, it's difficult to see who the good. We like to think in terms of good guys and bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been looking at this for such a long time. I don't know who the goodies and the baddies are anymore. I mean, are there any good guys in this war? I mean,
the Saudi-led coalition has been accused of multiple war crimes. I did a report last November revealing that the UK government had been notified of 366 alleged war crimes by the Saudi-led coalition, but only 79 investigations have been carried out by. They've got the coalition's joint incident assessment team, which has been accused by Human Rights Watch and other NGOs of failing to properly investigate war crimes. In 2017, UN blacklisted the coalition for killing children. I think there were 683 casualties, plus for attacks on schools and hospitals. But the Houthis have also been blacklisted as well. They've also been accused of taking hostages, recruiting child soldiers. So both warring parties have been accused of, various serious crimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like there's any chance of these getting investigated or punished anytime soon, does there?
Not at all, no. And the UK has been opposed to independent investigations.
Why? I don't get that. I don't understand.
Well, the UK and America and France have backed Saudi Arabia. That's their strategic partner in the Middle East. It's a bulwark against Iranian influence. So the UK government's position has been that they're supporting an important ally who helps the UK in the war against terrorism, if you want to call it that. So they've been loath to criticise the Saudis, as have America. The arms deals are a huge part of that as well. The UK government has licensed 4.7 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia since March 2015. So it's massive. It's a huge financial.
Why is it that this is something I've always wondered? So it's almost a case of, so if we're looking at it in terms of like a proxy war, and where it comes down to Iran versus Saudi Arabia, why is it that the West is on the side with Saudi Arabia rather than Iran? Because when we look at some of especially with the Khashoggi murder, I mean, call it murder now. I mean, we still haven't found the guy's body, but it has been recognised. This is, he was murdered in the embassy. And I think even the CIA have concluded that, the order came from the Saudi royal family, perhaps from MBS himself. So why is this regime an ally and Iran isn't?
Oil.
The $50 million question, isn't it?
Oil is a huge part of that. Again, Saudi Arabia has been a long-term strategic partner for the US and the UK. Iran has links to the Russians, so there's that dynamic as well. You've got the Israel-Palestine issue in the Middle East. You've got Hezbollah on Israel's border. They're backed by Iran. So you've got a lot of different dynamics to the Iranian-Saudi thing, and then it's the Shia-Sunni dynamic as well. It's a strange one. Saudi Arabia's human rights record is absolutely appalling. They've been accused of funding terrorism around the world. Iran's human rights record isn't much better. But yeah, the main point is that it's a hugely important partner for America, particularly. And that's been cemented with Donald Trump. And they did a £110 billion arms deals with the Saudis not so long ago. United Arab Emirates have just struck a big deal with America as well for Patriot missiles. So financially, there's strong ties there, less so with Iran.
Yeah, now these arms deals have been going on for a little while, and let's not kid ourselves. This isn't a new trade or business, but it seems ever since the Khashoggi murder, we're starting to focus on it a little bit more. Because it's kind of shining, as I said before, shining this big spotlight on, behaviour, things which have been tolerated or indeed ordered by the ruler of this country we call an ally. Has there been any? Certainly, there's been a lot more coverage of the Khashoggi murder than there has the war in Yemen as well. That also should be said. In terms of public perception after that murder, is this starting to impact in any way? Is it starting, do you think, to affect the relationship that Saudi Arabia has with its Western partners? Because I know that in the US Congress, they've made a lot of moves in recent months to try and pull out of this coalition that's at work in Yemen, haven't they?
Yeah, there's certainly been pressure put on the Trump administration to stop supplying weapons. Germany's stopping supplying arms as a result. There's been pressure on the UK, but so far the UK government hasn't given any indication whatsoever that it's prepared to stop selling Patriot missiles, for example. They're facing a legal challenge shortly. Campaign Against the Arms Trade took them to court a couple of years ago, arguing that the arms sales to Saudi Arabia were in breach of international humanitarian law. They lost that, but they've appealed, and the appeal is due to be heard, I think it's next month.
Crikey.
So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. The House of Lords ruled a couple of weeks ago that UK arms sales to Saudi Arabia were unlawful. The UK government has remained steadfast in its support for Saudi Arabia, and there doesn't appear to be any indication at this point that that's about to change anytime soon. Although they have, the UK government announced this week £200 million worth of aid to Yemen as well. So they are providing aid, but while at the same time they're providing the weaponry that's been used to, And the big problem is the war crimes, the allegations of war crimes made against the Saudis. I mean, this has been running now for 4 years, and they've been constant. There was a huge outcry last August. There was 44 children killed on a school bus by a Saudi airstrike by the coalition. That was linked back to Raytheon, although the bomb appears to have been made in America. There's kind of periodic outrage, and then it dies down. The Khashoggi case certainly put the spotlight on Saudi Arabia's human rights record. Hugely embarrassing for MBS, although they're denying that he had any knowledge of what happened. They're saying it was a rogue operation. There's 11 people going to go on trial. As an immediate response to that, some international organisations and political leaders boycotted Davos in the desert, which was a big business summit. Liam Fox didn't go. The Scottish government withdrew a representative they were going to send out to build up business links. But Raytheon still sent their representatives to the meeting, and it seemed to be a cosmetic gesture and back to business as usual. So, there has been a huge embarrassment for the Saudis. I think a lot of spotlight on what's happening, but nothing real in terms of yet of something major happening. It's proven hugely costly to the Saudis. They don't seem to be in a position that they're going to win this war anytime soon.
Which is crazy when you think about it, because, the Saudis, they have a lot of wealth and resource at their disposal. The Houthis, I don't know, do they have planes? I mean, it doesn't seem like a balanced conflict, and yet I think MBS, when he went in, his intention was just to get in and out and to crush them within a matter of weeks, but it's still dragging on.
Yeah, and I think the initial thought was they could go in and bomb them into submission very, very quickly, but that hasn't happened. So yeah, it's a huge problem for Saudi Arabia, and yeah, that spotlight is now on them. And they don't seem to be. These are alleged war crimes, mostly coming from airstrikes using smart bombs, which are precision-guided missiles. So why are there so many alleged war crimes? They're denying that they're targeting schools and hospitals and civilian structures and fields and factories, but there's been hundreds of claims of war crimes in over 4 years now. This isn't just the odd one. So, there's strong evidence to suggest that they are deliberately targeting civilian structures, although they deny that.
Yeah. Maybe there's just like 400 or so of these missiles that aren't working properly. I mean, is that the suggestion? I mean, like you say, is that many?
Well, Raytheon describes themselves as the world's leading supplier of smart bombs.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is that the conflict doesn't resonate so widely with the public as well. It's still quite obscure. So, there are small pockets of outrage at the time, but a lot of people, it just doesn't chime with them, unfortunately, which is a huge problem. Again, that goes back to, make it, as a journalist, you're trying to make that link, why people in Scotland should care about Yemen. Well,
one of those links that you've happened upon.
There's a huge factory in Fife making smart bombs that are being used by the Saudis. And Raytheon won't have any control over how the Saudis use these weapons. But there's that link there. So it's a debate about human rights. Our complicity, alleged complicity in war crimes, perhaps, and the UK government's response to that, and the Scottish government's response to that as well. The Scottish government have criticised some of the attacks. Some SNP politicians have been quite outspoken. For Douglas Chapman, MP, for example, but they've been accused of hypocrisy by campaigning against the arms trade and the Scottish Greens, who are saying, you're giving taxpayers' money to Raytheon in Fife, while at the same time condemning airstrikes. The UK government, again, has repeatedly said that its arms export control system is the most, quote, robust anywhere in the world, and that they're backing the Saudis and have no intention to stop backing the Saudis. So,
do you think that this is an industry perhaps that people aren't aware of? That you hear about, the arms trade, and it's murky, and it's, but it always feels like something that's further away. It doesn't feel like it's, just on the bridge, just over the bridge on the train, and then you rock up at what is likely to be a factory selling missiles that could, or making parts for missiles that could end up on some Yemeni school.
The arms industry in Scotland's a big employer. You've got Raytheon in Fife, more than 700 people. You've got BAE Systems, which is a big employer. They provide the Saudis with tornadoes and typhoons, fighter jets that have been involved in the conflict as well. You've got Leonardo's, which is a big Italian firm in Edinburgh.
All right.
They are seventh largest arms firm in the world. You've got Chemring in Ayrshire. They're another large arms firms. So there is a substantial arms industry in Scotland.
So this is, and then I guess they would be, if there's that many firms, I didn't realise there was that many arms firms operating in Scotland, I have to confess. So these people will be, or these companies rather, will be, having a massive contribution to the Scottish economy, one would assume.
Yeah, they do. As I said, I don't know the employment figures for BAE Systems, but certainly Raytheon told me that they employ more than 700 people in Glenrothes. So you've got the supply business for that as well. So it's a major contributor to the Scottish economy. So
what's the Scottish government's position on this? Because obviously right now, we're recording this in February 2019. Right now, the focus is very much on Brexit. I mean, you can run, but you can't hide. There is no escaping the story. And the Scottish government has lots to say on this, lots of things to say when they're, when the story suits them. But what have they said? I mean, what's the Scottish government's position on when it comes to the war in Yemen and perhaps alleged Scottish complicity in this? Have they said anything about it, or is this...
The Scottish government's official position has been that it doesn't fund the arms industry.
Right.
For example, the 200,000 that is given to Raytheon, the Scottish government has insisted that does not go towards munitions. It has gone towards, for example, expanding facilities management at the factory. Some of its answers have been quite vague, and as I said earlier, there's been criticism by some organisations of the Scottish government's position. It doesn't seem clear what exactly they're funding, although they do insist they're not funding the arms industry.
Right, but these companies who happen to make parts for the arms industry are being funded with public money.
Yeah. Raytheon's had £200,000, just over £200,000 in a series of grants over the last 9-10 years.
Crikey. It's amazing what you can get grant money for nowadays, isn't it?
Leonardo, the Italian arms firm, have received £6 million.
£6 million?
Scottish government funding, yeah.
What was that for?
Again, not quite clear. The Scottish government says it's not to... they don't fund the arms industry. Leonardo won't say. So...
But there must be some degree of transparency. I mean, this is public money. I mean, sort of Scottish Enterprise is one of these, these bodies set up to distribute funds to help regenerate parts of the economy, yes? But it's still money coming from the public purse. These are still grants that, I'm helping fund with my tax. So there must be some kinds of transparency, about what the breakdown is.
Yeah, it's been extremely limited, and any information I've managed to get has been through freedom of information requests. So they've revealed how much they've paid and given you one line, basically, on what that was for. So it's been difficult to get the information from them. But again, they insist that, the money is not going towards funding the manufacture of munitions.
I don't know how to square that, to be honest. So maybe that's like a really expensive redesign of the building. Expensive Italian marble in the corridors of the offices. I really don't know. So, I mean, I guess given let's put the sort of the development grants to one side, because, I mean, this is something that I know that you're still doggedly pursuing, because there's still money trails to be followed and so on and so forth. But I guess there's not much more of an incentive for the UK or the Scottish governments to do anything about this. This is this industry is a massive employer, generates a fair bit of money. So unless more people, I guess, know about what's going on, there's little incentive for them to change.
Yeah, I mean, the UK government's position is that the arms industry... I think the UK is now the second biggest arms supplier in the world as a nation. So it's huge. It's absolutely massive. And the Conservative government at Westminster, their position seems to have been, since coming to power, that the business deals are more important than human rights concerns.
One could possibly argue, though, that that's something that, business deals often tend to trump humanitarian concerns worldwide. It's I guess you could say it's not just in the UK, where the Germans not quite keen to start up, or was it the French who were wanting to start up selling arms to Saudi Arabia again? I don't know, there seems to be this constant tug of war, and that publicly you want to chastise the Saudis and slam what's been happening, because it's a dirty, dirty war. It's not a good conflict at all. But, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, almost, do you?
Yeah, well, the argument is that if Britain's not supplying the weaponry, they'll get them somewhere else. And the impact of that economically could be significant. So that's the debate about, what's more important, the human rights concerns or the business deals. Donald Trump's position has been so far that obviously the arms deals he's got with the Saudis and United Arab Emirates are absolutely massive to companies like Raytheon, which is a US firm. And they're again arguing the point that the Saudis are an important ally and provide lots of information about terrorism as well. So, there are more questions about the UK's role. My understanding is the MOD have got around 200 personnel that have been advising the Saudis. So it's been difficult getting more information on that. So, what exactly has the UK's role been aside from selling these weapons to the Saudis? Again, it's difficult to get the information.
What are they advising them on, like how to avoid the schools? Or, I guess I just kind of, because the overwhelming thing for me,
advising them on how to use the weaponry, for example, the technical aspects. But the understanding is that they have had access to the Royal Saudi Air Force HQ as well. So whether, how much knowledge do they have about the Saudis' targeting of, civilian, what knowledge do they have about, how the Saudis are using the smart bombs, for example. But the MOD, it's extremely difficult to get the information from the MOD. Some of the information came out in the High Court hearing with Campaign Against the Arms Trade. But again, there's commercial sensitivity, so governments are they won't reveal much.
No. Oh well. And so and on we go. And we're almost caught in this. You said that the debates, that conflict between business and human rights, and which is more important. And that's not going to change. That's going to keep going. But I guess the more immediate concern here is that this war is raging on, is going to keep going. It's that I can't see an end in sight. Can you?
There's currently a fragile ceasefire in place. I have no idea whether that's holding across Yemen. There was agreement made in Stockholm recently that the warring parties met and they were trying to broker some sort of ceasefire to continue discussions. Whether that holds or not, we'll have to wait and see.
But if
as I said, the UN, there's a meeting in Geneva today, to try and raise these urgent funds for humanitarian aid for the country, which is desperately needed because of the catastrophic situation.
And it is a catastrophic situation. Leaving aside it's difficult to say famine because certain conditions have to be met and so on. But you're seeing, kids, just in terrible, terrible conditions. The stories which do filter out are awful. I think the population is incredibly young because no one is living to a very old age. It's already, Yemen is a country which was on its knees before this kicked off. It was the poorest country in the Middle East by a long shot, even before all of this kicked off. Let's just say that ceasefire manages to hold, and let's just say that they managed to come close to figuring out an end to this war, which I'm not sure I can see at this stage. the lasting effects, though, are going to be enormous, aren't they?
Yeah, the infrastructure is destroyed in large parts of Yemen. The health system is virtually collapsed. I think another aspect is the impact on children. Children's education has been hugely disrupted because of the conflict. Children are traumatized with what they've witnessed. So the legacy of that, will be for a generation at least. And aid agencies have been making repeated requests for urgent help. The economic warfare aspect of the conflict as well means that aid isn't getting through, exacerbating the situation as well. So I mean, it's going to take years and years and years for Yemen to recover. Another huge problem will be the munitions, unexploded munitions, which happens in every conflict. The landscape will be littered with thousands and thousands and thousands of munitions that haven't exploded. It means that people can't access farmland. It's dangerous for the population. So I saw that in the aftermath of the 2006 July war with Israel and Hezbollah. The amount of cluster bombs that had been dropped on southern Lebanon at that time, they're still clearing them off. So that's, a lot of people don't realise that. I mean, you've got the same problem in Iraq and Afghanistan. Every conflict zone will have that problem. Of, the legacy. So it lasts for decades.
Decades.
Yeah,
if not longer.
Yeah.
It's astonishing just to, when I was reporting on this about 3 years ago, the stat that we used to always try and shoehorn in was that at least 80% of the country is reliant on external aid. At least 80%. And when you take a step back and think about that, it really is quite, it really does make you pause for a thought. And we would always refer to it as this forgotten war because this is going on now and you barely hear about it. And it's, I guess for me personally, it does make you stop and think that in some way, that our country here in Scotland, we are in part complicit with it. We're helping to manufacture things which are being used in that war.
Yeah, certainly Scotland has a role in what's happening in Yemen. It has. We've had that role for the last 4 years, and this situation is absolutely dire. So as a journalist, just trying to make people aware of that. There's a big arms industry in Scotland. It is very important to the economy, but the impact of what we make, smart bombs are landing every day on the Yemeni population. And the Saudis, it does seem there's strong evidence that it's indiscriminate bombing. Right. Lots have made more than 600 allegations of war crimes. They're not getting investigated properly. There's no independent investigations. No. And there's the risk, as the House of Lords ruled a couple of weeks ago, that the UK is complicit in breaching international humanitarian law.
Just marvellous, but we don't hear about that because we're too busy talking about Article 50 and what Brexit we all want. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's been completely sidelined as an issue. The Syrian conflict, Brexit, Donald Trump in America, it just doesn't make the headlines.
It sucks up all the oxygen, doesn't it? Well, we are doing what we can here on the podcast, certainly, to try and shine a light on these stories that are underreported for whatever reason. The lovely cheery conversation, Billy. Thank you very much indeed. Just before we wind it up, is there anything that if any listeners are wanting to hear more about this and want to find out more, obviously you've been reporting on this extensively for quite a while. We will post some links to your work. But is there anything that you would want people, if there's only one thing they took away from this conversation, what would you want it to be? What do you think, is the important takeaway here?
I think just that Scottish connection to something that's happening very far away, and it might seem to be, obscure and unrelated, but Scotland's playing a big part in what's happening in Yemen. Read up, have a think about it, and if you go on the Ferret website, all my stories on Yemen are there.
Yes.
So there's a lot of background information. Just it's about raising awareness and getting people to think about what's happening and the impact that we're having in Scotland on a war thousands of miles away.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for reporting on this and for ferreting away. Keep bashing those FOI requests in. Hopefully we'll find out what that 6 million odd quid is going on. And if there is 6 million odd quid going spare for people to, get invested in, we should see if we can put a little application in, boys. Let's thank you so much, though, Billy. That was brilliant. And if you want to read more from Billy, you are on Twitter, aren't you? It's at Billy Briggs. You also have your own website, don't you?
Yep, www.billybriggs.co.uk.
Excellent. So those are ways to keep in touch with what Billy's working on. The best way, of course, to see Billy's work is by reading The Ferret. This independent, non-profit investigative journalism platform is owned and run by its members. It's also behind most of the scoops here in Scotland. So if you want to stay ahead of the curve and hear more about these kinds of stories, do head to theferret.scot to find out more. And, of course, if you use the code Outwith19 when you subscribe, you'll get either a £9 discount on an annual membership, which is pretty good, actually. It's about a third off. It's not a bad discount at all. Or if you want a monthly subscription, use the code Outwith19 and you will get your first 3 months free. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. Remember to hit subscribe, leave us a review, a nice one. Please leave us a nice review, please. The nasty reviews, you can just email me personally. But do subscribe, leave us a review, and you'll be all ready and prepared for when the next episode drops. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.